Ladies and gentlemen, today we invite you to embark on a captivating journey with the Sterling Revelation. Prepare to be moved, surprised, and enthralled by a tale of destiny, sacrifice, and unexpected heroism. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button to join us on this incredible adventure. The crisp, unyielding edges of the acceptance letter dug into Sarah's palm, a stark contrast to the burgeoning joy that had, moments before, threatened to burst from her chest. Her name, Sarah Jenkins, shimmered under the hospital's sterile fluorescent lights, bold and triumphant alongside the prestigious university crest. It was a dream etched in ink, a testament to countless sleepless nights poring over textbooks, the scent of old paper a comforting lullaby. Yet, as quickly as elation bloomed, it withered, choked by a chilling reality, the accompanying tuition bill, a dizzying array of zeros mocking her meager savings. Then came the second, more brutal blow. Her mother, Eleanor, a woman whose resilience was as vast as the open plains she often spoke of, had collapsed. A sudden, vicious illness had seized her, demanding an astronomical sum for immediate surgery, a sum that dwarfed her tuition worries into insignificance. The hospital room, once a beacon of hopeful recovery, now felt like a sterile cage, trapping them in a desperate, silent plea. Sarah sat by her mother's bedside, the faint, rhythmic beeping of the IV pump a relentless metronome of their dwindling time. Her mother's hand, usually so warm and calloused from years of tireless work, felt fragile, almost translucent against her own. Tears, hot and relentless, streamed down Sarah's face, blurring the stark white walls. She wasn't merely crying for the lost dream of higher education. She was weeping for a life she felt slipping away, a future shrouded in medical debt and despair. The acceptance letter lay crumpled beside the daunting hospital bill, two symbols of impossible futures. She couldn't abandon her mother. She wouldn't. Desperation clawed at her, sharp and merciless. She pulled out her worn phone, its screen cracked like a spiderweb, and frantically dialed every number she knew, voices on the other end offering condolences, but no solutions. Each hang-up was a tiny, audible snap of hope. She murmured prayers, half-formed pleas to a sky she felt had abandoned them. Unbeknownst to her, a shadow detached itself from the muted hum of the hospital corridor. Mr. John Sterling, the formidable chairman of the Sterling Corporation, a name synonymous with power, wealth, and an almost mythical aura of influence, had been on his way to visit a board member. But the raw, unfiltered anguish emanating from the small, unassuming figure huddled in the waiting area caught his attention. He was no stranger to the cold grip of medical emergencies. Decades ago, his own mother had faced a similar life-threatening illness, and he remembered the crushing helplessness of being unable to pay. It was a wound that, despite all his subsequent success, had never quite healed. Mr. Sterling paused, an almost imperceptible hesitation in his otherwise purposeful stride. His eyes, keen and accustomed to dissecting financial reports and human motives, landed on the scattered papers. The university crest, the official seal of a prestigious institution, and then the stark, unforgiving numbers on the hospital bill. He saw not just a desperate young woman, but a flicker of the same unyielding determination that he had once possessed, a refusal to surrender even in the face of insurmountable odds. He watched as Sarah, even through her sobs, pulled out a notepad and began scribbling obscure government grants and charity organizations on her phone, her brow furrowed in fierce concentration. This wasn't just a plea for pity, it was a desperate battle for survival.
Without a word, a silent observer in this tableau of despair, Mr. Sterling reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored suit jacket. He withdrew a sleek obsidian black card, a symbol of limitless access, its power beyond the comprehension of most. He walked over, his footsteps barely audible on the polished linoleum. Sarah flinched as a shadow fell over her, but before she could look up, a hand, strong and surprisingly gentle, extended towards her. The card, cool and smooth, was pressed into her palm. "Use this." Mr. Sterling's voice was a low murmur, a quiet command that held the weight of untold resources. "Your mother will be fine, and so will your dream." He didn't wait for a response, didn't offer a name or an explanation. He simply turned and continued on his way, a phantom of generosity. Sarah stared at the card, then at the retreating back of the distinguished man. The name Sterling, etched on its surface, glimmered under the harsh light, a beacon in her storm. She felt a surge of unutterable gratitude, mixed with a profound sense of awe. This wasn't charity, it was salvation. It was a promise, unspoken but deeply felt, that someone, somewhere, believed in her, in them. In that moment, a new purpose ignited within her, burning brighter than any academic ambition. She would not forget this act of kindness. She would not merely repay the debt. She would dedicate herself to the very name that had saved her. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in the unknown. But one thing was certain. Sarah Jenkins would return to the Sterling Corporation. She just didn't know how, or when, or what she would find there. Her journey had only just begun. The diploma, a heavy scroll bound with a scarlet ribbon, felt strangely insubstantial in Sarah Jenkins' hands. It was the culmination of relentless effort, a testament to her brilliance in data analytics and financial strategy. Yet, as she stood amidst the cheering graduates, the cap and gown feeling like a costume, her thoughts were not on Wall Street offers or Silicon Valley startups. They were on a fleeting moment in a hospital corridor, a silent exchange that had reshaped her very existence. The name Sterling, once a distant constellation of power, now felt like a magnetic north, pulling her towards an unspoken destiny. She knew that a direct approach, waving her summa cum laude degree, would be futile. How could she repay a debt of that magnitude with mere professional service? Her gratitude was a living entity, demanding something far deeper, far more significant than a mere job. She needed to understand the behemoth that was the Sterling Corporation, to unearth its hidden vulnerabilities, to become an unseen guardian. And the only way to do that was to become utterly invisible, to merge with the very fabric of its existence. Her decision to apply as a janitorial staff member at Sterling was met with bewildered silence from her academic advisors. "Jenkins, your transcripts are stellar. You could write your own ticket anywhere," they exclaimed, their voices tinged with concern. She'd offered vague explanations about wanting to understand corporate infrastructure from the ground up, a line she'd rehearsed until it felt almost believable. But the truth was a secret she guarded fiercely, a fragile seed of purpose planted in the fertile ground of gratitude. The Sterling Tower loomed against the New York skyline, a gleaming monolith of steel and glass, a monument to corporate might. Inside, however, Sarah quickly discovered a different reality. The pristine surfaces and hushed corridors masked a subtle, pervasive tension. Her uniform, a simple charcoal gray, became her cloak of invisibility. With her mop and bucket, she moved like a ghost through the labyrinthine offices, a silent observer in a world of high-stakes finance. Her shifts often stretched late into the night, long after the last ambitious analyst had abandoned their flickering screen. These were her prime hours, her academy.
Every discarded document, every crumpled memo, every post-it note stuck to a forgotten monitor became a fragment of a larger puzzle. She didn't just clean, she observed. She didn't just listen, she analyzed. The faint scent of stale coffee and desperation often hung in the air after stressful meetings, a pungent metaphor for the unseen struggles. Sarah, with her keen analytical mind, began to piece together the mosaic of Sterling's internal workings. She noticed the subtle shifts in office layouts, the sudden appearance of unfamiliar faces, the hushed, almost conspiratorial tones of certain conversations. Her eyes, trained to spot anomalies in datasets, now scanned for discrepancies in human behavior. One cold Tuesday night, while meticulously wiping down a deserted executive floor, she found it. A discarded, partially shredded printout from a high-level meeting. It was a fragment of a portfolio analysis, and even in its incomplete state, the numbers screamed disaster. 90% of current investments in negative, a bold red header shrieked from the page. A tremor of unease snaked through her. This wasn't just a downturn, it was a systemic hemorrhage. She meticulously collected every scrap, piecing them together like an ancient scroll, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. This was what she had come for. The revelations deepened. Through careful observation of email trails left open on forgotten desktops and the occasional hushed phone calls from executives who thought the empty offices were secure, Sarah started to uncover the sinister undercurrents flowing beneath Sterling's polished exterior. The name Akagi Corporation, a Japanese conglomerate that had long been Sterling's strategic partner, began to appear with unsettling frequency. Their once collaborative relationship seemed to have curdled into something predatory. Akagi wasn't merely leveraging Sterling's financial woes, they were actively orchestrating its downfall. Faxes and emails hinted at coercive tactics, aggressive demands, and an almost gleeful anticipation of Sterling's collapse. It was a slow, deliberate strangulation masked by the pretense of partnership. But the most insidious discovery was yet to come. One night, while emptying the waste bin of Richard Thorne, the seemingly jovial and outwardly loyal vice president of investments, Sarah found a series of cryptic coded messages. These weren't discarded casually, they were hidden beneath layers of official documents. It took her days, working in secret during her off hours, using skills honed during her advanced cybersecurity electives to decipher them. The messages revealed a horrifying truth. Thorne, a pillar of Sterling's executive team, was a traitor. He was systematically leaking sensitive financial data to Akagi, providing them with Sterling's vulnerabilities, effectively serving as an insider asset. He was being compensated handsomely for his betrayal, his greed a poisonous serpent coiling around the very heart of the corporation. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The rot was not just external, it was festering within. The golden apple was worm-eaten from the core. A chill snaked down Sarah's spine, far colder than the air conditioning whirring in the empty halls. Her gratitude, once a pure, guiding light, now mingled with a fierce sense of indignation. Mr. John Sterling, the man who had rescued her from the brink, was being systematically dismantled by those he trusted, by forces he likely couldn't even perceive. The weight of her secret, once a burden of personal purpose, now felt like a ticking time bomb. She was an invisible phantom in the corporate machine, holding knowledge that could shatter its very foundations, yet powerless to speak it aloud without revealing her painstakingly constructed facade. How could a janitor, a ghost in gray, possibly expose a high-ranking executive and a powerful international conglomerate? The very thought was absurd, a whisper against a roaring wind. But Sarah Jenkins had faced absurdity before, and she had always found a way. The stage was set, the players unwitting, and the curtain was about to rise on a drama far grander than any she had anticipated. She understood now that her purpose was not just to repay a debt, but to fight for the soul of the Sterling Corporation. And the fight, she knew, would be anything but clean.
The atmosphere in the executive boardroom of Sterling Tower was a stagnant, suffocating pool of dread. Outside, the midday sun glinted off the polished Manhattan skyline, a mocking contrast to the gloom within. Inside, the air hung heavy with unspoken fear, thick enough to taste. Mr. John Sterling, usually an imposing figure whose presence commanded respect, now seemed diminished. His shoulders stooped under an invisible weight. His eyes, once sharp and decisive, were clouded with fatigue and a gnawing sense of betrayal. He sat at the head of the colossal mahogany table, its reflective surface mirroring the pale, anxious faces of his board of directors. Each flicker of a PowerPoint slide, each graph charting plummeting figures, was another nail in Sterling's coffin. David Chen, the CEO, a man known for his unflappable composure, cleared his throat.
but his voice cracked slightly as he delivered the grim prognosis. Ladies and gentlemen, the latest projections indicate a 90% loss across our core investment portfolios. Our attempts to renegotiate with Akagi have been met with escalating demands. They've cornered us. Without immediate, drastic action, the board predicts insolvency within the next fiscal quarter. A collective gasp, like a soft sigh of surrender, rippled through the room. The carefully constructed facade of corporate resilience crumbled, revealing raw panic. Solutions were tossed around like desperate prayers, asset sell-offs, emergency loans with crippling interest rates, even mass layoffs. Each proposal met with blank stares, each a dead end leading deeper into the abyss. Sarah, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, stood frozen in the hallway. The low hum of a ventilation system, the only sound besides the murmur of impending doom from beyond the polished oak doors. She had been meticulously cleaning the executive restrooms, a mop bucket, a silent sentinel beside her, when the urgency in the voices had intensified. Every word spoken, every despairing sigh resonated within her. She visualized the financial data she'd painstakingly uncovered, the insidious tendrils of Akagi's influence, Thorne's quiet treachery. This wasn't just a corporate crisis. It was an assault on the man who had given her a second chance at life. The very foundation of her benefactor's empire was crumbling, and she, the unseen guardian, was standing on the outside. A wave of intense heat washed over her, a combination of fear for Mr. Sterling and a fierce, almost primal need to act. Her hands, still clutching the mop handle, trembled. She knew the risks. Revealing herself now, a mere janitor, would invite ridicule, perhaps even suspicion. Who would listen to a cleaning lady when seasoned executives were paralyzed by fear? But the alternative, watching Sterling collapse, watching Mr. Sterling's legacy turn to dust, was unthinkable. It was a choice between self-preservation and profound loyalty. The decision, though terrifying, crystallized in her mind with the force of an unyielding truth. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Sarah pushed open the heavy oak door. The subtle creak echoed unnervingly in the suddenly silent room, a stark intrusion. Every head snapped towards her, eyes widening in a mixture of bewilderment and indignation. She stood framed in the doorway, a stark silhouette against the brightly lit corridor, her charcoal uniform a stark contrast to the sharp suits and crisp dresses of the executives. The mop bucket, forgotten in her hand, seemed to amplify the absurdity of her presence. "Excuse me?" she began, her voice a fragile tremor that nonetheless cut through the tension. "But I believe I might have some insights."
A ripple of disbelief spread through the room. A nervous cough broke the silence, then a low, derisive chuckle from the corner. Richard Thorne, the vice president of investments, his face a mask of feigned shock, leaned forward. "And who, might I ask, are you? A member of the catering staff, perhaps? This is a private board meeting, not a break room discussion." His tone was laced with condescension, a dismissive flick of the wrist. Other executives exchanged bewildered glances, their expressions ranging from open contempt to bemused annoyance. A janitor offering financial insights? What next? A barista running the Fed? Someone muttered just loud enough to be heard. Sarah felt a flush creep up her neck, but she met their gaze, her chin lifting defiantly. She wasn't just Sarah Jenkins, the janitor. She was the woman who had clawed her way back from despair, who had analyzed Sterling's every secret, who held the keys to their survival. It was Mr. John Sterling who broke the spell. His eyes, though weary, held a flicker of something unreadable. Curiosity, perhaps, or a desperate hope. He remembered the quiet resolve in her eyes at the hospital, the unexpected dignity even in her grief. "Hold on," he said, his voice surprisingly firm, cutting through the murmurs. "Let her speak." He fixed his gaze on Sarah, a silent invitation.
or perhaps a test. Sarah stepped forward, clutching the mop handle like a lifeline. Sirs, I've observed things. The market isn't just turning, it's shifting tectonic plates. Our portfolio is too concentrated in legacy industries. Akagi isn't just demanding concessions, they're pushing us towards bankruptcy to acquire our core assets at a fire sale price. Her voice gained strength, fueled by conviction. We need to diversify immediately. Pivot into renewable energy infrastructure, into quantum computing startups, into biotech breakthroughs. Liquidate the underperforming assets, yes, but don't just cut losses. Reinvest strategically. And most importantly, she paused, her gaze sweeping over the startled faces. We need to anticipate Akagi's next move. They're playing chess, and we're playing checkers. A profound silence descended, heavier than before. The executives who had initially scoffed now exchanged glances of genuine surprise, some even a hint of respect. Her words, though unconventional in their delivery, were sharp, precise, and resonated with an undeniable truth. David Chen, though still bewildered by her presence, found himself leaning forward, captivated. Renewable energy? Quantum computing? Those are long-term plays, highly volatile. He mused more to himself than to her. Volatility is opportunity, Mr. Chen, if you know how to navigate the storm, Sarah retorted, her eyes gleaming with intelligence. And long-term investments are the only way to build sustainable growth rather than just patching holes. She paused, her gaze briefly flickering towards Richard Thorne, a silent challenge. Akagi's strategy relies on us panicking. We need to do the opposite. We need to show strength, not desperation. Mr. John Sterling watched her, his initial skepticism slowly beginning to give way to a nascent sense of wonder. The details she cited, the strategic insights she offered, they weren't just guesses. They bespoke deep analytical understanding, a comprehension that defied her humble position. Who is this girl? The question echoed in his mind louder than any boardroom whisper. He remembered the desperate young woman from the hospital, the fire in her eyes. Could this be more than a coincidence? He felt a new kind of intrigue, a suspicion laced with a potent, unfamiliar hope. He had sought answers about his corporation's ailing health, and a voice from the shadows had given him a path. Now he needed to understand the shadow itself. He would begin his quiet investigation into Sarah Jenkins, the janitor who spoke like a financial oracle. The game had just changed, and he was determined to uncover all its players. The board, desperate and out of options, looked to Mr. Sterling for guidance. His nod was almost imperceptible, but it was a decision that would ripple through the very foundations of Sterling.
The weeks following Sarah's audacious intervention in the boardroom were a whirlwind of controlled chaos for Sterling Corporation. The initial skepticism among the executives had given way to a grudging acceptance, born of sheer desperation. Under David Chen's weary but hopeful leadership, and driven by Sarah's unshakable conviction, the directives began to take root. Legacy assets, once sacred cows, were liquidated with surgical precision. The capital was then meticulously redirected into the daring ventures Sarah had championed. The burgeoning renewable energy sector, the enigmatic world of quantum computing startups, and the volatile but promising biotech frontier. It was a gamble, a desperate leap of faith into the unknown. Sarah, still officially a janitor, was paradoxically at the heart of this transformation. She worked tirelessly, often clocking in before dawn and leaving long after dusk. David Chen, though initially bewildered by her presence, quickly recognized her genius. He sought her out constantly, a notebook always in hand, listening intently as she dissected market trends, predicted Akagi's likely retaliations, and brainstormed innovative financial instruments. Her analyses were sharp, her projections eerily accurate, like a finely tuned instrument sensing vibrations others couldn't detect. She was the ghost in the machine, whispering strategic secrets to the very men who had dismissed her. Meanwhile, Mr. John Sterling's curiosity had solidified into a quiet, relentless investigation.
The thrum of suspicion in his mind had intensified, a persistent melody in the background of his recovery. He still saw the desperate girl from the hospital, but now, overlaid upon that image was the face of the brilliant, analytical woman who had breathed life back into his dying corporation. The private investigator he hired was thorough, his reports a steady trickle of facts. Sarah Jenkins, summa cum laude, specialized in data analytics, no known family ties beyond her recently recovered mother. The paradox was stark, a prodigy hiding in plain sight. Why? The question gnawed at him, a persistent itch he couldn't scratch. He began observing Sarah more closely, his gaze following her as she navigated the halls, a quiet intensity in her movements, a spark in her eyes that hinted at secrets. The first glimmers of success were like faint streaks of dawn breaking through a long night. The new investments, initially volatile, began to stabilize, then to show cautious gains. The market, once hostile, seemed to respond to Sterling's bold pivot. The hemorrhaging of funds slowed, then stopped. A collective sigh of relief, palpable and profound, rippled through the board meetings. Sterling was not just surviving, it was, against all odds, beginning to breathe again. It was during one such meeting, where the recovery charts glowed green on the projection screen, that Mr. John Sterling made his move. He stood, his gaze sweeping across the boardroom, finally resting on Sarah, who was, as usual, meticulously cleaning the glass partition outside. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice resonated with newfound authority. "The turnaround we've witnessed is nothing short of miraculous, and it is largely due to the extraordinary insights of one individual, someone who saw what none of us could." He paused, a deliberate, theatrical silence. "I am pleased to announce that Miss Sarah Jenkins is officially appointed as assistant to the CEO, effective immediately." A stunned silence descended. All eyes swung to Sarah, who froze, the cleaning cloth dropping from her hand with a soft thud. Whispers erupted, a mixture of shock, jealousy, and reluctant admiration. Richard Thorne's face, usually a picture of smooth composure, contorted into a brief, almost imperceptible sneer before he quickly masked it with a polite smile. "An admirable decision, Mr. Sterling," he drawled, his voice too smooth, too practiced. "A testament to fresh perspectives."
Sarah's promotion was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it validated her efforts, giving her the official power she needed to truly implement her plans. She now had direct access to sensitive data, could attend high-level meetings, and collaborate closely with David Chen. The corporate firewall that had once separated her from critical information dissolved. She found herself thriving in the fast-paced environment, her analytical mind a perfect fit for the complex challenges Sterling faced. She was a silent storm, now given license to unleash her full force. Yet her new visibility also made her a target. The move immediately created palpable resentment among long-serving executives, many of whom felt bypassed and humiliated by the rapid ascent of a janitor. Foremost among them was Richard Thorne. His initial polite facade quickly crumbled, revealing a deep-seated animosity. He saw Sarah not as an asset, but as an existential threat. Her presence meant his carefully constructed web of deceit, his lucrative dealings with Akagi, were in jeopardy. He saw the admiration in Mr. Sterling's eyes, the growing trust, and it fueled his burning resentment. "Miss Jenkins," Thorne would often begin, his voice dripping with false civility, "while your unconventional insights have been noted, perhaps we should leave the finer points of strategic acquisition to those with more experience." He would subtly contradict her in meetings, dismiss her suggestions as overly optimistic or lacking practical application, and consistently push for decisions that subtly undermined Sterling's newfound stability, favoring strategies that seemed to benefit Akagi indirectly. He was a master of passive aggression, a serpent in the garden, his venom slow-acting but potent. Sarah quickly realized that Thorne wasn't just a disgruntled executive. He was actively working against Sterling's recovery. She and David Chen, now her closest ally, began to formalize their counteroffensive, a comprehensive plan to not only fend off Akagi, but to expose and dismantle the internal corruption that had weakened Sterling from within.
Thorne, with his constant obstructions and veiled criticisms, was clearly part of that internal rot. He would accidentally lose critical documents, misplace important emails, or forget to include key data points in reports, all designed to slow down Sarah's progress and create an atmosphere of chaos and doubt. The tension between Sarah and Thorne became a palpable, unspoken war. Every meeting was a battlefield, every proposal a skirmish. Sarah observed Thorne's subtle tells, the slight tightening around his eyes when she presented an idea that threatened his illicit dealings, the way he would subtly shift the conversation away from anything related to Akagi's tactics. She was gathering evidence, piece by piece, not just to save Sterling from Akagi, but to root out the cancer that was Thorne. Meanwhile, Mr. John Sterling's private investigation continued to deepen. His Thamtu had confirmed Sarah's stellar academic record, her lack of any prior connections to Akagi, and her mother's miraculous recovery, which had indeed been funded by an anonymous donation matching the exact amount of the card he'd given. The pieces were beginning to fit, painting a portrait of extraordinary coincidences, or perhaps a deliberate long-game strategy of gratitude. He knew Thorne was suspicious, but he also knew that Thorne was a long-time trusted executive. The possibility that Thorne was the traitor, and Sarah, the anonymous benefactor's beneficiary, was the savior, was a reality too profound to grasp fully. He decided to play his own hand close, allowing Sarah to continue her work while meticulously observing both her and Thorne. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation where loyalty and betrayal would clash, and the true identity of Sterling's savior would finally be revealed. And Sarah, navigating the treacherous waters of corporate politics and Thorne's cunning resistance, knew that the real battle was yet to come. Her every move was a calculated risk, a high-stakes gamble with the future of Sterling and the legacy of her benefactor hanging in the balance.
The air in the Sterling Corporation's grand boardroom crackled with an electricity far more potent than any static charge. It was the eve of the decisive board meeting, where Richard Thorne planned to present his evidence against Sarah, aiming to cement her downfall and his own ascendancy. Sarah and David Chen had meticulously prepared, their strategy a finely woven tapestry of intercepted communications, financial irregularities, and meticulously cross-referenced data points. The fate of Sterling hung in the balance, a pendulum swinging between redemption and ruin. Sarah stood by the panoramic window, the glittering tapestry of the Manhattan night stretched out before her. Each distant light seemed to represent a life, a dream, dependent on the future of Sterling. Her heart, usually a steady drumbeat of resolute, now fluttered with a nervous anticipation. The truth she carried was a heavy burden, a secret she had guarded for so long, and its imminent unveiling felt both liberating and terrifying. She had spent years cloaked in invisibility, and now the spotlight was about to find her. The meeting began with a deceptive calm. David Chen opened with a summary of Sterling's miraculous recovery, the numbers now painting a vibrant green on the projected charts. A ripple of cautious optimism spread through the room. Then Richard Thorne, looking smug and self-assured, took the floor. His voice, usually smooth as silk, now had an edge of barely contained malice. "Gentlemen and Ms. Jenkins," he began, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "While we commend the recent upturn, I have uncovered some troubling discrepancies regarding the origins of these innovative strategies. It appears certain individuals may have ulterior motives, potentially aligning with external forces to destabilize Sterling from within." He gestured towards a series of prepared slides, intending to twist every success into an indictment against Sarah. He was a master illusionist, ready to conjure doubt from thin air. But before Thorne could even click to his first incriminating slide, Sarah stepped forward. Her voice, clear and resonant, cut through the quiet hum of the room, silencing Thorne's impending accusations like a sudden, unexpected chord. "Mr. Sterling and esteemed members of the board," she began, her gaze locking onto Mr. John Sterling's. His eyes, usually guarded, now held a deep, unreadable intensity. She held up the black card, the very one he had given her years ago. It gleamed under the boardroom lights, a silent testament to a forgotten moment. "Many years ago," she continued, her voice unwavering despite the tremor in her heart, "when my mother lay gravely ill and I faced the impossible choice between her life and my education, a kind stranger intervened. He placed this card in my hand, a gesture of profound generosity that saved my family and allowed me to pursue my dreams." Her gaze softened as she met Mr. John Sterling's. "That stranger was you, Mr. John Sterling." A collective gasp, louder and more profound than any previous, swept through the room. The air grew thick with stunned silence. Thorne's jaw dropped, his face paling to an ashen white as the realization dawned on him. David Chen's eyes widened in disbelief, then understanding. Mr. John Sterling himself sat utterly transfixed, his powerful facade crumbling to reveal a raw, unfiltered mix of shock, profound recognition, and a surge of overwhelming emotion. The Thumpties reports, the myriad coincidences, the questions that had haunted him for months, they all converged into this single stunning revelation. The janitor, the financial oracle, the woman he had silently investigated was the same young girl he had saved from despair. "I concealed my identity and my qualifications, not to deceive, but to understand Sterling from its foundations, to honor the debt I owed you, not with money, but with dedication and truth. I chose the path of invisibility to uncover the real rot within, the one that threatened to devour your legacy." Her gaze then sharpened, piercing Thorne like a spear.
"And what I've found, Mr. Sterling, was not just external pressure from Akagi, but a deliberate, calculated betrayal from within these very walls. A betrayal orchestrated by Richard Thorne." She then launched into a meticulous, damning exposé. Her words, calm but devastating, laid bare Thorne's entire web of deceit. She presented irrefutable evidence, encrypted communications between Thorne and Akagi executives, detailed financial trails of his illicit payments, and documented instances where Thorne had deliberately sabotaged Sterling's recovery efforts, twisting data and misdirecting funds to benefit Akagi's hostile takeover. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, shattering Thorne's carefully constructed image of loyalty. She projected screenshots of his coded messages, played snippets of recorded phone calls that she had meticulously recovered from wiped company servers, and displayed bank statements detailing large, unexplained transfers to offshore accounts. The details were so specific, so undeniable, that no one could refute them. Thorne, his face a grotesque mask of fury and fear, tried to interrupt, to deny, but his voice was drowned out by the rising crescendo of outrage from the board. He was exposed, his betrayal illuminated under the harsh light of truth. Security, prepositioned by Mr. Sterling, who had anticipated a confrontation, moved in swiftly. Thorne was apprehended, his protests turning into desperate guttural threats as he was led away. The air in the boardroom, once stagnant with despair, now vibrated with a mix of shock, relief, and righteous anger. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of legal action. Sterling Corporation, armed with Sarah's irrefutable evidence, launched a devastating lawsuit against Akagi, exposing their predatory tactics and their complicity in Thorne's corruption. Akagi, reeling from the scandal and facing massive penalties, was forced to withdraw from the U.S. market in disgrace. In the quiet aftermath, as the storm settled, Mr. John Sterling approached Sarah. His eyes, now clear and brimming with respect, met hers. "Sarah," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I had my suspicions, yes. My investigator confirmed much of what you revealed tonight, but to hear it from you, to see your dedication, I am humbled. You did not just save my company, you saved its soul. You repaid your debt 1,000-fold. Sarah's eyes, bright with unshed tears,
finally allowed herself to feel the release of years of hidden struggle. "I simply did what I believed was right, Mr. Sterling. You taught me the true meaning of generosity and integrity." David Chen, stepping forward, placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Sarah, your courage, your brilliance, it's unparalleled. Sterling needs you, not just as an assistant, but as a leader. We've weathered the storm. Now let's build the future." The Sterling Corporation, cleansed from its internal rot and freed from Akagi's clutches, began a new era of prosperity. Under David Chen's visionary leadership, and with Sarah Jenkins, now publicly acknowledged as his indispensable right hand, the company thrived. Her strategic insights, coupled with her unwavering integrity, became the bedrock of Sterling's renewed success. She was no longer just the brilliant graduate, nor the anonymous janitor, but the Sterling revelation, a symbol of resilience, loyalty, and the extraordinary power of an unseen hero. Her journey from shattered dreams to corporate savior became a legend whispered in the halls of power, a testament that true strength lies not in titles or wealth, but in courage, intellect, and the profound human spirit of gratitude.